I'm Ian McConnell, and I'm uncomfortable with Ian McConnell. This is Uncomfortable with Ian McConnell. Brought to you by Pivotal Moments Media.
Yes, it is I. I'm back, Ian McConnell. Welcome to Uncomfortable with Ian McConnell, presented by Pivotal Moments Media. I'm Ian McConnell, and I almost always stand in front of a microphone holding a guitar, but I'm not doing that today because I want to try something different, so that's my uncomfortableness for today. But I do want to tell you what I've been thinking about. I want to see what happens if I take this off. I won't stroll too much because I know we will mess with the alignment and all that stuff. But I want to tell you what I've been thinking about today. Today I've been thinking about the theory of evolution. And I have a theory about the theory of evolution that I've been pondering today. And it's just in draft form. But here's my thesis. The theory of evolution as it pertains to all organisms, all species of organisms, we can use those principles to improve our individual lives. That's my theory. It's all in draft form still. But I'm going to generally give you the rough draft, and the great thing about science is it needs peer review. So if you find holes in my argument, just we'll talk about it afterwards, and I will then revise my theory, and that will be great. Science is awesome. I like doing math and science. That's one of my things. Here's what I think. Okay, first of all, the theory of evolution generally states that, well, let's rephrase that. The theory of evolution is a system that benefits species for valuing traits in an individual of that species that allows them to both survive and proliferate better. Essentially, when two organisms reproduce, DNA gets kind of mutated. DNA has lots of different pieces of it, so little mutations just generally happen, which I think is more of a feature than a bug, because otherwise nothing would ever change. All organisms would be exact copies of the previous organisms. But anyway, little mutations occur, and most of those mutations do literally nothing. They don't present at all. Some of those mutations present to the detriment of the organism, and that's like when you have a birth defect or you are predisposed for a terminal disease or something like that. That's a detriment. But every once in a while, a mutation will occur, and it will be beneficial to that individual of the organism. It will be able to survive better and or proliferate better. The real benefit in the theory of evolution is that the society of that organism, all of the other ones, have to decide generally that that is an attractive quality. That trait is an attractive quality, and we want to mate with that creature that has the better trait and have more offspring with them. So like, for example, at some point, cats didn't have teeth that were as sharp as they are now. But then through some genetic mutation, some cat down the road had way sharper teeth, and the way sharper teeth allowed it to survive better by getting better food or protecting itself better or something. Other cats around it had to go, hey, that sharp-toothed cat is super sexy, and we want to mate with that cat. And eventually, that cat since it was able to survive better and it was found attractive by the other members of its species, the sharp tooth became an attractive quality down the line, and the dull-toothed cats died off. And so then cats had sharp teeth. So that's generally how that kind of works. What that means for us individually, I kind of think of this as each individual human person is kind of like the species of the organism. We have to look at the traits that we have and decide which ones we think are going to be most advantageous to us. For us, the goal isn't really to survive and proliferate. Perhaps it is. At some point it was. But in our individual lives in modern life, it's really we need to survive at a level of enjoyment. And we want to improve our conditions as well as we can, either by increasing our chances of survival or increases our level of enjoyment. How we define level of enjoyment is subjective, and we can decide for ourselves how that is. But we can use the principles of the theory of evolution to improve our lives. By that, I mean random occurrences occur. Basically, the DNA that you have, where you were born, the experience that you have around you, the general circumstances of your environment work together to give you ideas. All of these random pieces of input come into the system that you have. You, being the experiential person you are, can look at each thing and go, okay, I really liked how I handled that situation with kindness. That led to a really good situation. So I'm going to pick as an attractive trait in myself, being kind. I think that will improve my level of enjoyment in life. Or you can go the other way and say, what's up? You can come in. You can go the other way and say, okay, I didn't like how I handled that. I punched that person in the face. That got me punched in the face. I don't want to be punched in the face. Therefore, in the future, I'm going to devalue the trait that involves me getting punched in the face, which is the one that also makes me want to punch the other person in the face. And so we, as individuals, can look at the traits that we have exhibited randomly, whatever, in the world and pick which ones we'd like to continue. The trick here is all those random genetic mutations that happened in the species all together have to happen over generations, you know, because each random occurrence, each random DNA mutation has to happen when something reproduces. But in this analogy, our reproduction, our general things are just other experiences that we have. So we have two options. We can either run lots of tests, we can run lots of mutations to see how many beneficial traits we can get out of there and then choose to find attractive in ourselves, or we can choose this is almost like intelligent design. We can choose which traits we think are going to be the most advantageous to us in the future, and then choose to live our lives that way and just see what happens. That's all I have on that. I don't know where else it goes. It's just a draft, but I think there's something to be understood by it. I think there is something to, in your life, taking the experience that is around you and analyzing or observing, how did I feel in this? How did my level of enjoyment of each moment change based on how I acted, the traits that I exhibited, and how would I like to experience things in the future? Maybe we want sharper teeth. Maybe we want to be kinder to people. Whatever that is, you have the ability to look at your own life and figure out, how am I going to evolve? I think that will be fascinating. That's all I have on that. I have a guest on today, Andrew Hyatt. We've never met before, which is my favorite thing ever, because that means we get to meet for the first time and we get to kind of get to know each other on camera, and that's the best. So let's go ahead and do that. Andrew, you ready? Turn up. Let's do it. Andrew Hyatt, welcome to the podcast.
How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm very excitable today. I have a lot of just like jumbled thoughts. I was really trying to put this like whole thesis thing together in like the past hour and a half. I thought about it earlier, but then I was like, oh man, this is way too nebulous, so I got to get it together. So anyway, I'm a bit scattered, but how are you?
Generally scattered all of the time. So,
yeah, you're generally scattered all the time. Have you always been that way?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like I have a very hard time with focus until there's pressure. And it's like you said, you thought about it an hour before, kind of like locked it in, right?
Yeah.
That's how I am all the time.
Yeah. How was school for you?
I had great relationships with my teachers, and that's why I passed everything.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
That's about it. I knew that cultivating relationship was more important than like going home and doing homework. In my mind, that's how I looked at it.
Totally.
And I was fine. So
yeah. That you looked at your traits of like being likable and stuff like that. I was in school, and my teachers, they liked that I was very studious, but they didn't like that I always talked back. So we kind of had opposite experiences.
Yeah.
But now here we are in the same place.
That's it, man.
Which is rad. You were down in Nashville for what now?
I've just been down here for a couple weeks. I've been back and forth, for years.
From where?
Sudbury, Ontario. So
Sudbury.
Sudbury. Yeah.
Cool.
So about 4.5 hours north of Toronto.
That sounds.
It's the land of snow and lakes. That's about it. That's all we got up there.
Is it snowy there now? Do you know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I just actually, before I came up here, I checked my cameras on my house, and I was like, man, I got a shovel when I get home, and this is not ideal. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What brought you down here? Just writing?
Yeah, writing. There's a conference right now, CRS as well. So that was the primary reason that I came down.
Okay.
Most of the writes that I had were going to be over Zoom, but just because I was here, I was like, I'm just going to hop on and in person. But yeah, there's a big conference down here right now. So
yeah, how has that experience of that conference been?
It's been good, man. I think it's like burning the candle at both ends, right? Because you wake up and you're on, and then you stay on, and then stay on some more, and then it's 4 a.m. and you go to bed, and you're like, I got to be up at 8.
Sure.
So you do 4, 5, 6 days of that in a row, and it burns you out, which is why I was drinking Jack and Red Bulls.
Fantastic. Do you feel like that lifestyle of like, I know it's only for 6 or 7 days, but do you feel like that's something that you like romanticized when you were younger, about like, oh man, once I'm like famous and rich and I've got great music, I get to go do these things?
Yeah, I still romanticize it, or else I would have been out a long time ago. You know what I mean? But yeah, definitely, man. I think I've always been a night person to begin with. I've never been really, I don't love the day. Like I usually get up at like 11 earliest, but then I'm up till 4 a.m. anyway. So these are like vampire hours that I kind of keep. It's the best, man.
Yeah. Do you do that because you like being alone? I used to stay up really late because that was the only time I could be alone.
I feel like in general, I've just been kind of pre-programmed for that. I mean, came out of high school. I worked in a mine as an iron worker. So I did structural steel for 4 years.
Nice.
And then I worked a lot of night shifts and afternoon shifts. So it was always late nights. And then when I left that because I wanted to play music for a living, well, nobody's really playing music in the middle of the day in Sudbury, Ontario, or like in Northern Ontario. So then I was playing bars till 2 a.m. So, for years and years, and then kind of subsidizing that with bartending on the side. So I just feel like I've been living that life since I was 23 years old.
Sure.
So it's really hard to make that flip to going to bed at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. and waking up at 7 a.m. It just feels very wrong to the whole rhythm of my brain.
Yeah. Do you feel like you are like really energized by the grind of like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this all at the same time. I'm going to work. I'm going to make the money. I'm going to have a life and I'm going to have music. Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah. The highs and lows, I would say. Like there are days where, 100% I'm all about it. I feel like the tighter life squeezes on me, the more I'm that. But then the more anything is successful, the more I kind of let off the reins a little bit. And I feel like I have to learn that like if things are moving in the right direction, that's actually the time to kind of buckle down and work even harder.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's so difficult to trick your feelings into that though, because like your feelings are always struggling to get to a place of contentment. And then if you like achieve something, you're like, oh, this is great. And as soon as you're like, oh, this is great, your body's like, cool, don't have to work anymore. You're good.
Yeah. I always feel like how much of that is just passed down generation to generation, like all the way back to the beginning of time.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, I've got a cave and I have fire. I can chill out now.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas like you got to constantly worry, I guess.
Yeah.
But
why do you have to you have to constantly worry?
I feel like I have to constantly worry because I'm a musician at 35. You know, it's like that's just you're always chasing the next thing and the next high and the next high.
Yeah.
And that's a terrible way to live. And I think I'm learning to kind of deal with that as I go, but that's how my brain works.
That's interesting that you say it's a terrible way to live. To me, from the outside, it looks like just one of the ways to live.
Yeah, I mean, there's good and bad to it.
Okay, so not terrible.
It's not terrible.
There's some downsides.
Yeah. There's highs and lows that come with it for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you say you're a musician at 35, and thus you worry. What is it that you're worried about?
Man, just as someone who comes from a background of I have a trade.
Okay.
So I look at everybody who like left high school and got a trade and started making, within 2 years, they're making $100K a year, or more, whatever. There's just like, there's a level of stability there. There's a ceiling, but there's a level of stability. And then, they get married, they have kids. It's just like the societal norms, right? They're checking all of those boxes that, when you're a kid, you think like, oh, when I'm 25, which is not the case anymore. Like I'll be married, I'll be like doing this, I'll own a house, blah, 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 whatever. And then as you get older, you're like, well, I haven't hit any of these checks in my life, or very few of them, or I've hit them and now they're out the window.
Right.
So for me, I feel like at 35, I'm constantly worried about where I'll be when I'm 55 or 65.
Yeah.
And I fight with that every day to take a pause and go, actually, like life is probably more about the journey than it is about the end. It's about being in this moment and enjoying like the people that you're around, the people that you meet, because you never know. You're not promised the next day or the next day or the next day, but it is hard not to worry about, future me.
Totally.
Yeah.
I have a lot of difficulty planning for the future. Mostly, I feel like I used to like really be like, okay, and then I'll do this, and then I'll do this. And then either the plan fell apart along the way because there's so many more variables than you can actually take into consideration, or the worst thing is that you actually achieve your goal and you're like, that didn't feel as good as I thought it was going to feel.
Yeah, you're like, now what?
Yeah.
Now what? I'm still hungry.
Yeah. But man, I am so grateful. I've been very angry in my life about like, oh, I've been pursuing this thing for so long, and now that I have this thing, I'm not happy with it, whether it's relationships, whether it's career, whatever. But it is kind of, it's a wonderful like reminder. It like is a Kickstarter to be like, okay, hey, maybe nothing is going to make you happy. Maybe if you want to be happy, you have to find it wherever it is now.
Yeah, there's something to that. I feel like in music for a long time, and this kind of speaks to what you're talking about, for a long time, especially in the career aspect where you're creating, and then you're creating something that you feel is special, but then you're handing it off to other people to tell you its value.
That's fascinating.
That was something for a very long time where I would be proud of something. It would go out and if it didn't succeed at radio, or if it didn't succeed at streaming and it failed, or the songs that I love were not the ones that took off, then that would affect like my happiness.
Oh yeah.
But somewhere along the way, I learned to just be like, no, I'm proud of this, and it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. So like it's like you said, finding those like moments that like make you happy and holding on to those are important, because only you can really know what makes you happy and choose the things that are going to make you happy.
Sure. Yeah. That's interesting that you say that, because that is very true of art. I also find that, especially because we like really, we put ourselves in the way that we view the world, or the way that we want to view the world, or whatever. We put ourselves into these things and we put them out. And if it's not accepted, it's like, oh, they're not accepting us.
Yeah, you take it personal.
You do take it personally. Yeah. I can also imagine, like, you know, you said you worked in iron, or, you know, anything that you make or sell or whatever, like, you are asking for somebody else to value it, right?
Yeah, and I feel like with something that's a little more tangible, for me, it seems a little bit easier, you know? Like
it does. There's a better norm of like, okay, this iron bar costs this much.
Yeah, or like, you know, when I was connecting steel for 4 years, it's like, at the end of a day, you could see your progress right there in front of you. Whereas with music, you can lock yourself in your basement and make a record, but then you put it out there and you don't actually know what's happening with it for a very long time. So there's less tangibility to it.
Do you like Legos?
I grew up loving Lego. Yeah,
I can imagine working with steel and stuff. Like the building aspect would just be like, the process is.
Yeah, it's similar. Lego's a little less dangerous, but
I'm quite sure. Yeah, it's a little bit. It's like it's like the video game practice of building
it's
steel.
Like it's like race car driver on a video game versus like actually driving it.
Yeah. So what is it that you enjoy about music?
Man, from a very young age, I shouldn't say never. For a long time, I was never good at expressing what was going on in my head. It just felt like chaos all the time.
Yeah.
And there was something about picking up a guitar and starting to like write stuff down that got my thoughts out and in a way that were coherent to me. It was like funny. I actually had a talk with a friend 2 nights ago saying I can look back at every record that I've ever made and realize what was about to happen in my life. Like it was like foretelling of the relationships that were going to end, the moves in my life that were going to happen, the changes in career or whatever, even when I wasn't doing this full time, but I was unaware of it at the time.
That's so
But
funny.
like those records were written a year in advance. Like, you know what I mean? Like, like it's like you're listening to these songs that you're writing. You're going, oh, maybe I wasn't happy in this relationship, or maybe I wasn't happy in this job, or maybe I was chasing this thing that I knew wasn't good for me, but I thought it was good for me.
Right.
And it's like a timestamp looking into the future, which is it's a very strange thing to be doing that on autopilot, but then somehow not realizing it like there in the moment.
Right. Yeah, it is so fascinating because music is so good at like identifying a feeling rather than like generally when I listen to a song, I'm not like, okay, between the beginning and the end of this song, this singer solved something. Like that's usually not the case. It's usually like, I feel like this and I think it's because blank, or maybe they don't even do that. It's just, I feel like this and it's because you suck, you hurt me, I hurt you, whatever it is. But it is interesting when we kind of have to have that music or some way to identify what is it that we feel before we can go, all right, now that we know what we feel, like, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, exactly, man.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Cool. Okay, so you live up in Canada, and is there like a special kind, do you make country music?
Yeah.
Okay, is there like a special kind of country that they make in Canada?
No, man, it's just country music that comes from Canada. I mean, you know, like the most rural parts of the States, like that's kind of how I feel is where I just grew up in the Canadian parts of those, you know what I mean? Like hunt, fish.
Yeah. Do you tour or like play for American audiences too?
I don't really have a presence at all outside of writing in the States. But as far as like playing, it's all Canadian. Yeah.
That's rad, man.
Yeah. I've had a couple American cuts along the way that, I've done okay, you know, but that's about nothing major.
Were they
but
things that excited you a lot at the time?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like before I even had an artist career, I was writing a lot, and in the pop world, I've only had success in Canada. But you know, at the time, my first ever American cut was this guy Josh Grayson. Cut one of my songs. Yeah,
cool.
And it was never a single, but I remember being down here, and I think they had done a deal with like the Kroger chains or something like that. And it was like on the station. And I'm like, I didn't know that at the time. And I was just in a grocery store, like buying groceries, and all of a sudden a song I wrote came on.
That's so fantastic.
I was like, oh, this is kind of neat. Like,
yeah.
But also where, what?
Yeah.
You know, like that kind of thing.
Do you feel like you like have a vivid memory of that moment now?
Yeah. I was buying cinnamon raisin bagels. Like
That's awesome.
I knew exactly what I was doing at that time. Yeah.
How did it feel? How did it like affect you?
You know, it just, it's like a breadcrumb, keeps you going.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, just like, okay, keep going, just enough, you know?
Yeah. What motivates you now?
I don't know, man. I just feel like I just want to make music that I'm proud of now. That's kind of where I'm at. And like there's just this thing in my head that says, keep going. And for better or worse, I think that's what I'm going to do.
Sure.
I feel like I have to make music to stay somewhat sane. Like if I don't do it, if I don't play and I don't write, I become this version of myself that I don't love. But when I'm playing and writing, I feel like all of the things that I like, anything that I should be probably dealing with a therapist is like dealt with through those things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I'm very pro therapy. I go to therapy. I've learned a lot from it. But the things that I have learned, have you ever been to therapy?
Yeah.
I mean, the things that I've learned from therapy, I generally just apply on my own these days.
Yeah.
So I'm sure
it's I'm 100% pro therapy at all. Like I lost my voice for 2 years roughly. Ooh. And then had to kind of like reassess who I was as a person. You take away the thing that felt like breathing just naturally for years and years. And then you're like, okay, well, if I'm not an artist, if I'm not a musician, if I'm not a singer, what am I? And that can send you down this deep, dark rabbit hole. Yeah. And then you're like, you know, as you're like trying to rebuild, you're living on your mistakes rather than your successes, and you're living on your failures rather than your wins. And I remember sitting in this therapy session, and we were trying to identify like the root moment where music began to feel like a challenge to me, or began to feel like this thing that would give me these like anxious breakdowns. And we identified it the first time it ever happened. And my therapist looked at me and said, okay, so if one of your peers in music, if that happened on stage, like if they did that, or for you, what would you rate that? 1 out of 10, 10 being the worst thing. And I was like, well, I was in a room full of industry people, and like I missed the first 3 lines of a second verse, and it like frustrated me. And then my voice, like anxiety kicked in, and my voice started getting all messed. And I was like, oh, I'd rate that as a 10 because I bombed in front of my entire industry. And they were like, if one of your friends missed 3 words, what would you rate that? I'm like, I don't know, like a 3 on this, a 3 out of 10, maybe a 2. And she goes, well, why would you not extend the grace that you extend others to yourself? Yeah. And in that moment, I was like, whoo, therapy is good. You know what I mean? Like,
it is like, fascinating how we really can't, as humans, we're not designed to look at ourselves. Like, you know, we think that we're, you know, we think that we're an extenuating circumstance all the time. Yeah. Everybody else is totally normal, but we are so bad or messed up or whatever. Yeah. Do you remember, like, I remember thinking back about performances from my youth, and like, I played the cello growing up, the piano and stuff like that. And the ones that I really remember aren't the ones where I did well. It's the ones where I was just like really embarrassed. Yeah, man. It's funny how we do that. Like I've had so many wins, like, you know, just these like monumental moments in my life where I've played like pretty much every dream venue that I've wanted to play in Canada. Yeah. I've had the opportunity to play. And I remember like the ballroom at like some hotel for some conference more vividly because I screwed up. You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, 100%. Yeah. I want to go back a little bit. You said that you have something inside you that says keep going. What does keep going look like to you? Does it involve, like, what change does that involve? Does it involve any change at all? Is it the same? Is it what's up? Yeah, man. I mean, right now it involves a lot of change. I feel like I'm hitting this like additional transition in my life, you know, going through a split with someone that I've been with for years and years. And it's like, how many years? We were together 10 years. Wow, that's a long time. I feel like, you know, when you get together, she was 19, I was like 21 or 22. It's like, that's a long, like, those are like critical. I'm sure you've changed a lot. Yeah, we're very different people. We still care about each other, and it's very amicable. Sure. And like, I could only say nice things. And hopefully it's the same in reverse. Yeah. But you know, you realize along the way that your dreams change, and growth is uncomfortable. And so it's like, for me,
right now, that thing that I'm chasing, or like that thing that's driving me, is I didn't feel uncomfortable anymore living in this small town. I just felt like that was my ceiling. And I'm like, if I feel comfortable, then I'm probably not going to be the best version of myself, because that means that my growth has stopped.
Right.
So I'm like, what scares me the most? And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to live in this town anymore. I'm going to like walk away from my friends and my family. Not walk away, I'll still be in touch, but like go to a new city that I have friends here, but I haven't lived here. And just like, I want to be where music is and surrounded by people that I want to be in rooms every single day, where it's like, if I have to walk out of the room feeling like a total bag of crap because I wasn't on it or my brain wasn't working fast enough, it's like, that's the only way to learn. It's like to be in that squeeze consistently. So yeah, that's kind of what drives me, I think.
Okay, I have 2 questions on that. First, have you watched BoJack Horseman? Do you know that show?
Like 2 episodes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
One of the things that you just said about you stop growing is like almost verbatim what they just said in an episode I just watched.
Nice.
You might enjoy the show. It's a cool show.
Nice.
The other thing that I was going to ask is, I was going to actually say, I've now been here for almost 6 years, 6 years and a couple of months. And I'm now at this place where I'm like, okay, I feel like I've squeezed the knowledge that I'm sure there's lots more knowledge here to get, but I've gotten far enough on the learning curve that it's slowed down. It's diminishing returns. So I'm kind of like looking for a different place to give me different input and stuff like that.
Yeah. Just again, growth. It's like, if you're comfortable, it's like, it's not good for you to just constantly be like, oh yeah, I do this one thing and I do it really, really well. It's like, well, maybe it's time to learn something new then.
Yeah, that's true, man. That's interesting. Did you fantasize about like going to LA instead of Nashville, or was it always Nashville? I guess you make country music, so Nashville feels more.
I mean, I wrote pop. I've written a lot of pop.
Yeah, right, of course.
In the early days. I was working out of Toronto with a label there, and my experiences in LA is like, I love LA. I love like the look of it. I love like the vibe there. I love the ocean. But I feel like the industry there, and this is just my personal experience, I'm sure there's plenty of people who have great experiences in LA, is I feel like it's a town of like, they kill you with yeses there. Like, that's how I feel about it. Everybody says yes, but nobody actually means it. Whereas here, I feel like, you know, if something's shit, they're just going to tell you it's shit. You know, it's like, that's how I feel. Like, I just feel like there's an honesty there. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear.
You're
but
allowed
I just
to swear.
did.
It's cool.
Okay, yeah.
What's the Toronto scene like?
I feel like it's a mix.
Okay.
It's like a little bit of a mix. It's like, it's a melting pot of LA and Nashville. It just depends, you know, how south. If Toronto is like closer to Detroit and you're moving this way, then fine. But if you know, where I come from, I feel like they're very honest to a fault, and
y'all do have a reputation for being honest people.
Yeah, to a degree. Yeah.
Have you been to London at all, or New York, or?
I've never been to London. I've never been to New York. No. So.
Okay. Rad.
Yeah. I'm sure they're cool cities. I hate densely populated areas. Like, I despise it, actually. Yeah. Which is another reason LA does not appeal to me. Nashville, I feel like I can go 40 minutes, 30 minutes outside of town, and there's like land where I'm like, oh, trees, all of this. But even Toronto, I lived there for 5 years, and I had to live right downtown so that if I wanted to just like look out and see just the lake, I could do that. Like, I could stand in a park and there's trees in the lake, so I didn't have to see these like buildings blocking out the sky behind me. Yeah. That's something that would just like make my throat feel like it's closing in.
Sure.
So
yeah, man. Toronto, I assume, what of that, like early 2010s that you were there?
Yeah.
That's an exciting time for Toronto. You got The Weeknd, you got Drake, you got the Biebs.
Yeah, man. It was good
I don't
times.
know. Was Shawn Mendes? And he might have been a little later.
So he was later, but I co-wrote with Shawn quite a few times. Yeah. And so his like camp, there's just a lot of, anyway.
Totally. Yeah. It's been interesting to watch, because like there hasn't been another big Canadian. I mean, those 4 are humongous. Yeah. And then like, maybe there hasn't. I just haven't seen like anything quite to that level. But they're heavy hitters. Something was in the water in Toronto at that point.
Yeah, dude, 100%. I don't know what it was, but it was working. I feel like all of those guys left. I'm not actually thinking of Shawn Mendes, but now that we're talking about it, I like so many of those artists. They were all passed in Canada. That was a thing. Like, they were Canadians, and all the labels just went like, we don't see it. And they all came down here, and they're like, we see it, because they were Canadian in Canada, they were like, I don't know, it's got to be like American artists that are gonna,
that's interesting.
like, blow
Do
up.
y'all like?
And then they'd come down here and just like explode, and then Canada would be like, these are our people, we
Yeah,
love them, we
that's
loved
so
them first.
funny.
It's like,
That's
no,
so funny.
you actually didn't, but
Yeah,
no one at a label wants to say that, you know what I mean?
It's like both America and Canada want something like kind of exotic.
Oh man,
It's like, oh, just somebody that's not exactly like us.
there's a Canadian artist here, Tennille Arts had a #1.
Oh, I know Tennille. Yeah, we used to write together.
Yeah, so like one of my favorite voices.
Yeah.
I can literally remember talking to Tennille and her saying like, man, Canada will not give me a play to save my damn life. Like she could not get a play there. And then the second like that song took off here, Somebody Like That, Love Somebody Like That, is that what it was called? You know, that song went #1 here. And I specifically remember scrolling through Twitter and seeing like a program director from one of the biggest chains in Canada being like, just want to let everybody know we were like Tennille Arts' first spin in Canada. I was like, yeah, you were spinning it because it was working in the States. So like now you're taking credit. It's just like, that is, yeah.
Do you like games?
What kind of games are we talking?
Any kind of games, things where you win.
Yeah, I'm very competitive. Yeah.
Do you see like your music career or the scene as a game?
I see it as like a game of chess.
Okay.
I feel like, yeah. Chess and relationship chess is how I look at it. Yeah.
Wow. We see it super differently.
Okay. How do you see it?
I almost see it. Well, I do a lot of I produce all my own music, and I write most of the things by myself, and I mix and I master, I shoot my own videos and all these kind of things. So I'm playing like the internet game more than I'm playing like the Nashville game. And I did play the Nashville game for a while, and I fairly quickly realized that I was making country music, and I'm just not country. I don't have those roots. I also am just interested in so many things. I'm like, I'm trying to fight through a saturated field where I just don't have the advantages. So I'm going to like try and find a different game where I do have an advantage. I can find some kind of niche or something in there, and I can play that game instead.
Yeah, I think that's really smart, man. I mean,
it's just one way to do it. But this is this is also a cool game. It's interesting, I remember valuing if I could just get a publishing deal, if I could just get a label deal, that kind of thing. And like, there's still parts of me that like really wish that I had gone down that road.
Yeah.
Just because it was the original dream, you know?
Yeah.
But at some point I'm like, okay, now all these dreams that I did have, like those didn't make me happy. Like, are you sure this is what you want? Because the glamour is not going to propel you. It's the lifestyle that you're going to have to live if you do that. Do you want that? Really? Are you willing to make those sacrifices? And my answer at some point was no.
Yeah. I feel like no matter what, like if you took that way or I took this way or whatever, like, yeah, it's like the highlight reel looks great, but like the lows are all the same. It's like the highs and lows. Like if you bust your ass and like you do all this content and then it's like not popping off, like that like breaks your heart because you've put all of this energy. And again, it comes back to that thing where it's like, I've created this thing that I see value in, and then you hand it out to the world of social media that like rewards you with like comments and likes and like streams and all of this. And if you don't get that in return, then you're like, well, is it not worth anything? You know what I mean? And then on my end, it's like, I don't consider myself the most talented singer. I don't consider myself the most talented songwriter. I know my strength is relationships. Like that's where I win. And storytelling is where I win. So I'm like always thinking in terms of like, what is my greatest strength? It's kind of like what you were talking about at the top, right? It's like, what is this thing that like appeals to other people? And mine is sitting in rooms with people, having conversations, sharing like very openly, just being very like honest right away. And, I feel like that's how I play. I play the game, I guess. And then I only want to make music and like have relationships with people. Like I actually hate the industry side of stuff so much. So I just try and like make friends with people that I respect and that I like. I don't associate with the ones that I don't respect or that I think are just greasy, because I hate greasy. Yeah, man, it's just different approaches, right? Like
it really is. Yeah, I'm always so impressed by folks who are able to identify their strengths and also like combine the strengths that they have. Like you say you're not the best songwriter, best singer, but you do have those strengths that you can songwrite and you can sing too. I would assume a fairly high level. So you can take those and your overall great strength of relationships and combine them into this career that's yours. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. That's man. Awesome. Absolutely. I think everybody needs to do that though. It's like being self-aware is like the greatest thing that you can have. If you can be self-aware, it's like, that is the greatest trait to me that I value in anybody. It's like self-aware and self-deprecating. It's like, those are the wins.
I'm with you. I also have noticed how many self-aware people are just so unhappy.
Yeah.
You know? And sometimes I'm like, maybe that's the problem. Maybe the problem is that we're aware of ourselves. And if we just stuck to the prescribed thing, if we just couldn't think, never thought outside it.
The ignorant bliss.
The ignorant bliss,
like, oh man, I got a story about this. We were actually out a few nights ago, and there's this gentleman, just to speak to this, and he goes, it's like this, just like this Michigan dude who's like, he's a little rough around the edges, gem of a human being. But, you know, he's like bragging on his wife. He's like showing us pictures. He's very drunk. And he's like showing us pictures. He's talking about like his ring and how cool his wife is. And then like, I don't know, man, he just walks over and he goes, and he's a big man. Like he's a big man. And like, he's definitely past the prime of his life. You know what I mean? Like maybe there was a time where this man could wheel any woman in the bar, but it was not that moment. Okay. And only to say, because he was like, you know, man, he's like, I got to tell you, like, I'm super committed to my wife and my family. He's like, but if I took this ring off, he's like, I could just wheel any woman in this bar. He's like, but I believe in Jesus Christ. And he like puts it back on. And then he walks away, and I look at my friends. I was like, tonight I'm going to go to bed and pray for the confidence of that man. Like, I just want to have the self-confidence of this man that has no clue about what's actually happening in the world. I'm like, I would love that so much. Like ignorance is bliss.
That's so funny. Yeah. I know that I don't remember the name of it, but there's like a psychological phenomenon that the most confident people are usually the less knowledgeable.
Yeah.
You know, about their own circumstances.
Yeah, which is like a nice way of saying like dumb is good.
Yeah. Okay, I want to wrap this up, but I have a last question. What is your alone time like?
Mainly just like weeping. No, I'm just kidding. Just joking.
What, you too? Wow.
Yeah, I've got a big German Shepherd, and like one of my favorite things is just like take her on trail walks, no headphones, no phone. I've been finding a lot of time away from like any kind of connection as far as like socials go, really kind of tops the tank up for me.
Yeah.
And just like being in nature, if I could do that. I've got a lifted 4x4 Sprinter, lifted and leveled Sprinter.
Oh, yeah,
so
right.
like
a van, that's a van.
Yeah, yeah. And I got like a conversion kit that I put in and out of it, and I'll take that up to the middle of nowhere and just stay there for 2-3 days just by like the big water, and just kind of hang out and make fires and kind of brew coffee. And, you know, it sounds cliche, but honestly, there is nothing better than I feel like renews me than that. Like just being, I'll like build kind of like a bush sauna on the edge of this lake, and then like heat rocks for like 4 or 5 hours. The job is just like, you know, collect wood, keep that going, and then make a sauna out of that, and then go jump in this lake that is way too cold, and then back into this like bushcraft sauna, and just kind of back and forth. And I feel like that is like the perfect alone time for me by myself. I do need to be around people. Yeah, with tasks, like very task oriented, very focused. And I feel like I get a lot of clarity in like direction and where I want to go by not thinking about where do I want to go in life. It's just like suddenly I'll just be like, oh, I think this is like the thing, or just like things kind of line up for me.
Sure. When you are like in your head, is it mostly like racing thoughts? Are you like meditative? What's your...
Yeah. So, when I'm not like a normal day, like my brain feels like the top of a tree in a windstorm. Okay. It's like the best way that I could describe it.
Is it unpleasant?
There are days for sure. Like I'm medicated. Like I happily talk about the fact that I take medication. And it feels like I become like the root of the trunk of the tree a little bit more since I've been on that, which is like a lot more peaceful. I have a lot more clarity. But yeah, without that, or with like lack of sleep, like a week like this where I'm not sleeping, I'm drinking, I'm, you know, middle of a separation, like all of that, like my brain just feels like chaos all the time, and it's really hard to like zone in. So yeah, a little bit of chaos.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you going into your head for this one.
Yeah, it's all good.
It's so much fun. I love talking to people who just live different lives than I do, because I feel like I've said this, I think, on here before, but it's like microdosing, like a different life experience. You know, I'm just like, absolutely. Okay, like I'm probably not going to spend 12 years of my life in Sudbury.
No, don't do it. Not suggested.
But I can generally, I have some sense of what it might be like to be someone who's from there. So
Speaking of, do you microdose? Is that a thing?
I don't microdose. It is a thing. I mean specifically microdosing, a different life.
Okay,
you know?
I was like, are we
it's
going there?
Like seeing a movie or reading a book.
Okay,
or
gotcha.
I do like drugs, but I haven't microdosed.
Yeah, okay, I got you.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's probably all the time we have. Thank you,
nice,
Andrew.
Yeah, appreciate you having
Andrew
me, man.
Hyatt was our guest today. Thanks for tuning into Uncomfortable. That is our last episode for a little while, and then we will figure out what to do from there. Thanks for being here. Fantastic.